What's going on? This is your man John Fortune, your host of the Frustrated Fan Sports Show, and today I'm going to talk about something that is like a topic that has been bothering me from the moment I've started doing the evaluations, and that's been the first. Let me start off with this. Check on all the old people in your life, because especially when they live by themselves or they live a little distance away. Always check out on all the old people that you know, you love, you respect, you pay attention to, you care for. Always check up on them, because you never know what they're doing. Sometimes they don't do a good job with taking care of themselves. So always check in on them, make sure that they're okay. Make sure that they're all right. My mom, my mom calls me, and I call my mom every day. I make sure that I speak to her every night. I also call my neighbor, who's an older lady. I call her every night just to make sure she's fine. So again, like I said, all the old people in your life, just call and check in on them. Any of your friends, call, check in on them, and all that type of stuff. But I wanted to say that first, because that's why I've been away for a minute, because just checking in on all the older people in my life, and making sure they're fine, and making sure they're okay, and things of that such nature. They don't need anything. So definitely check on all the old people. But I want to get to the point of this thing. I've gone through what I consider the thing that is the topic at hand, is the curious case of the Michael Penix Jr. evaluation. It just seems like the eval for Michael Penix Jr. has been all over the place, and yet it's filled with a bunch of lies as well. There's so many things that's talked about with Michael Penix Jr., but at the same time, there's not a lot of honesty going on about his evaluation, who he is, what he is, and also what he brings to the table. So I'm going ahead to debunk a lot of the myths. And then after I debunk the myths, I'm then going to tell y'all what's special about this guy, because there's so many times that you see people and it's like, what type of evaluation is really going on in this NFL? Like, are people just trying to convince others to take a guy that they know is not that quality of a quarterback, or is it more of a dark side of things that is playing into the role of the evaluation? So first myth I'm going to debunk. The very first myth I'm going to debunk. Michael Penix Jr. is older than all the other quarterbacks in the draft. That is actually a lie. Michael Penix Jr. is actually going to be 23 years old at the day of the draft. He turns 24 in May. So in actuality, Michael Penix Jr. is in fact younger than what people are saying that he is. Not another element to this is that Bo Nix, whose birthday was in February, is actually 24 right now. Then you take somebody like Jaden Daniels. Jaden Daniels will be 24 in December. So understand, as much as people try to make this age thing about Michael Penix Jr. a big deal, it's not. Because at the end of the day, 24-year-olds being drafted in the first round of the NFL draft, hey, this has always happened. Always. In fact, here's a little nugget. How many of y'all remember how old Kirk Cousins was when he was drafted back in 2012? That's right. He was 24 years old. You know who else was 24 years old? Let's talk about that 2012 draft. You know who else was 24 years old in that 2012 draft? Ryan Tannehill was 24. And here's a really big nugget. That 2012 NFL draft, Brandon Weeden was taken by the Cleveland Browns in the first round I think he was picked number 22. Brandon Weeden was 28 years old. Taken in the first round at 28 years old. Brandon Weeden didn't have the passing ability that Michael Penix had. Didn't have none of that. Neither did Ryan Tannehill. Neither did Kirk Cousins. So with that being said, when y'all talk about age and stuff like that, when it comes to the NFL draft, y'all can miss me with that, because there's been plenty of 24-year-old quarterbacks that have been taken in the draft and actually did well in the NFL even afterwards. So with all that, I don't want to hear that. On to the next thing. The next issue I have, or the next topic that has been evaluated, has been his injury history. Now, you're talking about he's had injuries, right? But how big is those injuries if he hasn't experienced any major injuries in 2 years? Not only that, he was cleared at the combine. He was cleared at his pro day. I mean, he actually had two pretty healthy seasons in a row. And when you analyze the fact of everybody saying, well, we got to see the medicals. 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 Why did nobody care about the medicals when Tua was drafted back in 2020? Nobody cared about the medicals then. Tua was drafted injured. Tua had been injured his entire college career. The entire career. He was injured his whole college career. Came into the league already injured. And guess what? He still went 5th overall. So again, when y'all want to focus on something that is anything related to injury, why was it possible for a team in the Miami Dolphins to draft Tua, who was injured? Tua could not do much of anything. He was injured the day of the draft. He was already injured. Tua had been injured his entire college career. We're talking about a guy, Michael Penix, who was 2 years, who's been 2 years successful, no injuries, and Tua, who was injured his whole college career. Why was the medicals or anything like that not a focus on Tua when he was coming into the draft? Nobody cared. Seems like nobody cared. So again, the medical stuff, miss me with that. Next is the whole thing of, he doesn't throw short passes or whatever, right? Short and intermediate passes, right? Well, clearly most of y'all who've ever watched Washington wasn't really paying attention to what was going on at that time, because if you were, there wasn't a lot of times he needed to throw short or intermediate short passes. He didn't have to throw short routes or short passes or anything like that. He didn't have to do that. And when he did do it, guess what? There was a lot of times where he would throw them to a tight end and Jack Westover coming out of the backfield, or Dylan Johnson coming out of the backfield. That, like, the offense he was running didn't necessarily have him doing a whole bunch of across the short passes, because why? They had deep threats. So there was no need for him to run that. There was no need for him to make those type of passes or to throw those type of passes, because the offense didn't call it for him to do that, and there was no need for him to do that. So again, guess what? It's not his fault that there's not a lot of tape of him throwing short passes, but guess what? There is film where you see him throwing short passes to a leaking tight end out the backfield, or to Dylan Johnson coming out the backfield. So again, miss me with that one too, because again, that has nothing to do with him. That was an offense thing. So when it comes down to it, all these evaluators are always saying something about Michael Penix Jr. Oh, he's not athletic. He's not really that athletic. Well, did anybody care about Joe Burrow's athleticism coming out of college? Nah, they didn't. Did anybody really think that Tua was going to be this incredibly athletic quarterback coming out? Nah, because he came into the league injured. Nobody cared about Justin Herbert and his ability to be mobile. Nah, nobody cared. So why does it matter when it comes to a guy like Michael Penix Jr.? Tell me, why does it matter? And not only that, how can you look at a Drake May, a J.J. McCarthy, and put them ahead of a guy who's the best passer in this draft? I've been screaming that for the longest. Michael Penix Jr. is the best passer in this draft. In a league where passing is king, you would think that they would make a point of saying, hey, this guy needs to be either the number 1 overall pick or the number 2 overall pick. And again, even when people bring up stuff that doesn't make any sense, like people will sit up there and say, well, his footwork is bad. Okay, his footwork is bad. You know who else's footwork was bad when he was coming into the draft? Patrick Mahomes. You know whose footwork is still bad to this day? Patrick Mahomes. Patrick Mahomes doesn't throw from this great base or has very good footwork when he's going back into the pocket. Patrick Mahomes is known for having bad footwork. So guess what? That's not true. That doesn't mean anything. Then they say, oh, well, he's not quite as accurate throwing to his left. Well, it's because he's a left-handed quarterback, and 9 times out of 10, he's normally got his back turned. But guess what? Again, there's never a point where he has to throw that often to the left. But when he does, he's pretty accurate that way too. He's not accurate out the side of the pocket. I disagree with that too, because there was a couple times, in fact, the first Oregon game, if most people remember, he was flushed out of the pocket, basically was taking his time getting to the sideline and threw a rifle of a pass to Devin Cope in the end zone with such precision that the defenders who was in the end zone along with Devin Cope couldn't believe that Michael Penix got the ball to Devin Cope that way, that accurately, and in that amount of time. And then all these people who are like, I want Drake May. I want J.J. McCarthy. It worries me because this kind of reminds me, and I tell people this all the time, this Michael Penix situation, because again, this is not like last year where the white quarterback that was the top white quarterback in last year's draft was Will Levis, and he wasn't that good. He wasn't no better than the 3 guys that was ahead of him. When you really think about that, what is it that Drake May has, that J.J. McCarthy has, that will make any evaluator of any team think that Michael Penix is not a better selection or a better prospect than those 2? I mean, for real, Michael Penix, I know this may be a little hurtful for some people, especially in this Washington area. Michael Penix is actually a better prospect than Jaden Daniels. He's actually a better prospect than Caleb Williams when you're focusing on the fact that he throws the ball very well. That's what he does. That's what he is. That's what he do. In a league where passing is king. But this does remind me of 2017. This reminds me a lot of the 2017 draft. And a lot of y'all are going to say, John, 2017? Yes, the 2017 draft. Not because Drake May is a North Carolina quarterback, or not because The factor that bothered me the most then about the 2017 draft is what still bothers me today about the 2017 draft. Let's start off with Deshaun Watson. Deshaun Watson was the best quarterback in college the past 2 years before that draft. I mean, he just came off of the national title win in 2016, I guess, early 2016, when he beat the then Ohio State team. That was a really good team. Then he comes back at the end of 2016 and the beginning of 2017 and beats the then Alabama, the big Alabama, not little Alabama, not the Alabama we know now. No. The then Dynasty Alabama. He beat the Dynasty Ohio State and the Dynasty Alabama at the time. Both for national championships. Was the best quarterback going into that 2017 draft. The best quarterback in that draft. He threw for 400 and something yards in that Alabama national title game. Two-time national title winner. Was without a doubt the best quarterback in that NFL draft. The second best guy in that draft, and these were guys that I said these were the two elite guys in that draft. The other guy was Patrick Mahomes at Texas Tech. What most people don't remember about that Texas Tech season, that Patrick Mahomes season, is that Patrick Mahomes was killing it. I think that year he only had 2 bad games. I think it was the game against West Virginia where they lost, and the game against, I think it was Iowa State or Missouri. It might have been Iowa State. Those were his 2 bad games. But other than that, everything you see Patrick Mahomes doing right now in the NFL is everything he was doing in college. The big game that everybody pays attention to should have paid attention to, and it's the game that got Baker Mayfield drafted number 1 overall the following year. Even though people don't want to admit that was that game. But it was the Texas Tech versus Oklahoma game. That was the game where it was a shootout. Baker Mayfield versus Patrick Mahomes. Baker Mayfield ended that game with, I think it was 530-something yards and 7 touchdowns. And Joe Mixon, who was the running back, I think he had 2... Okay, so I think Baker Mayfield had 560-something. And if I remember Joe Mixon had 300 yards rushing less than what Baker Mayfield had passing. So I think Joe Mixon had 260-something as well. Patrick Mahomes in that game threw for 700 and I think like 30-something yards or something crazy like that. And then added another 88 yards. I think it was 88 yards rushing the ball. Patrick Mahomes in that one game accounted for 800 and something yards of offense. In that one game. He had no defense that year. He had Patrick Mahomes' whole time that he was at Texas Tech, I think, he had no defense that year and the year before. But Patrick Mahomes was doing exactly what he was doing in college, in the league. He did exactly that in college. Mitchell Trubisky was a tier down from them two. I had him listed as a tier 2 guy along with DeShone Kizer, who was coming out of Notre Dame. DeShone Kizer and Mitchell Trubisky was practically almost the exact same quarterback. But for some reason, Chicago felt the need to take Mitchell Trubisky instead of Deshaun Watson or Patrick Mahomes. And it was the craziest thing I could ever imagine. And every time something comes up when somebody drafts a quarterback and they say, well, his potential is what we're looking at. Do you really trust in a guy's potential when he's not one of the best quarterbacks in college, especially when you have a pick that high? Chicago moved up in the draft to take Mitchell Trubisky. Everybody forgets that. And this is why every time I see, and this even goes back to when I tell y'all I jumped on the quarterback carousel in 1995 when Charlie Ward wasn't drafted. And as much as I want people to interview Charlie Casserly, I want people to interview North Turner and ask both of them why Charlie Ward was not a choice for their quarterback of the future. Neither one of them wanted Charlie Ward. First, the myth with Charlie Ward was that he was too short. Charlie Ward and Heath Shuler were the exact same height. Not only that, Charlie Ward was a bigger guy than Heath Shuler weight-wise. Charlie Ward was also the best passer in that draft. So, it always bothers me when quarterbacks like Michael Penix Jr. sit up there. See, everything that they criticize Lamar Jackson for, about his lack of ability of being able to throw the ball, identify passes, throw with timing, anticipate throws, is everything Michael Penix is. But yet, what y'all ding him on all this stuff, that's not even true. Again, the age thing. Michael Penix right now is 23 years old. When the draft come around, he will be 23 years old. He doesn't turn 24 until May. So guess what? Yeah, he'll be 24 when the season starts. But guess what? During the season, Jaden Daniels will be 24 as well. And nobody cared that Kirk Cousins was 24. The injury thing. He hasn't experienced the injury in 2 whole years. Nobody cared that Tua came into the league injured. Was drafted injured. The mobility thing. Nobody cared that Joe Burrow wasn't the super mobile guy. Nobody cared that Justin Herbert wasn't this super mobile guy. But yet, nobody cared about that. Nobody talks about Joe Burrow throwing all these different passes if the offense didn't then tell him to do that. The only reason why is because nobody talks about the fact that LSU team had all the weapons in the world on that team. So there was no way for Joe Burrow to fail. But nobody brings that up. They only bring it up when it's about Michael Penix Jr. So for all y'all who sit up there and evaluate Michael Penix Jr., all y'all doing is trying to nitpick and find little minor stuff to ding him on when there's nothing to really ding him on. Michael Penix Jr. is the best passer in this draft. And I will say this. Any general manager, any coach, if they draft a J.J. McCarthy or a Drake May before Michael Penix Jr., they should all be attached to not only the success of their own quarterback, but also be attached to the success of Michael Penix. If Michael Penix outdoes Drake May and J.J. McCarthy, then guess what? You're talking about whoever drafted Drake May and J.J. McCarthy before Michael Penix should be fired. Not only that, guess what? If you sit up there and see that Drake May and J.J. McCarthy are exactly what you see them be in college, you should be fired as well. Y'all tell me what y'all think. Do y'all think I'm taking it a little bit too far? But again, this is the curious case of the Michael Penix Jr. Evaluation This guy, Michael Penix, I've said it from the beginning, and I'll keep saying it, because every time you hear stuff, it just sounds like a big bunch of echo chamber, because it just sounds like a whole bunch of people who aren't doing their research. Michael Penix will be 23 years old at the day of the draft. He turns 24 the next day. Jaden Daniels will be 24 years old in December. The season will still be going on by then. Bo Nix is already 24. Bo Nix turned 24 in February. Y'all tell me what y'all think. How do y'all feel? Do y'all feel that the Michael Penix evaluation has been unfair, or has it been fair in your eyes? Y'all tell me what y'all think. Other than that, this has been your man John Fortune, and this has been the Frustrated Fan Sports Show.